If you're currently renting, I've got some bad news for you. Rents have risen to their highest levels ever, almost everywhere.
Renting is expensive. In fact, Australia is officially one of the most expensive places to rent on the planet.
$800 a week for a two-bedroom apartment in Bondi Beach.
When you're applying for a rental property in Perth, 50 people showing up.
All right, losers, there's 87 groups here today, so it's whoever's going to offer me the most rent. Now, everybody rush in at the same time, please. Remember to leave me your number and email address so I can reject your application and then harass you for the rest of your life.
Picture this. A woman in Hobart just sent in her 14th rental application this month. 14 applications, 14 rejections. She's not unemployed. She's not some risky tenant with a bad history. She earns $72,000 a year working for the government. Perfect rental record, glowing references from previous landlords, and she still can't find anywhere to live. This is Australia's rental market in 2026, and for millions of people, it's no longer just expensive. Because right now, in 5 Australian cities, rents aren't just going up, they're exploding. Finding a place to rent has become nearly impossible, and ordinary people, people with good jobs, with savings, with spotless rental histories, are being shut out completely. This is about being in the wrong place at the worst possible time. What I'm about to show you isn't just numbers on a spreadsheet. This is a breakdown of the rental market happening in real time. 5 cities where the basic laws of supply and demand have collapsed so badly that regular Australians are making choices no one should ever have to make. Let's talk about where the real crisis is happening. Hobart, where finding anything is impossible. Let me give you a number that sounds like a typo. Hobart's vacancy rate hit 0.4% in late 2025. That means there are only 124 rental properties available in the entire city. Stop and think about that for a second. Not 124 good properties, not 124 affordable ones, just 124 properties total in a city of over 240,000 people. If you're looking for a rental in Hobart right now, you're competing against roughly 2,000 other households for every single property that comes up. That's not a rental market, that's a lottery where almost everyone loses. Rents skyrocketed by nearly 10% in just 1 year, the fastest growth of any capital city in Australia. The typical rent hit $601 a week. Houses rent for $585. Units cost $517. But those numbers don't capture the desperation. They don't show you what it's like to be rejected 20 times in a row for places you can easily afford. Properties in Battery Point, Sandy Bay, North Hobart, they last days on the market, sometimes just hours. Real estate agents are drowning in applications. 20, 30 people applying for a single rental. And here's where it gets really dark. Tenants are now offering 6 months rent up front just to get considered. That's become normal, not exceptional. The human cost is staggering. Couples in their 30s are moving into share houses because every other option has vanished. Entire families are cramming together. Grandparents, parents, adult children all under one roof. Not because they want to, but because the math leaves them no choice. Nurses, teachers, essential workers, they're commuting an hour each way from cheaper towns because they literally cannot afford to live where they work anymore. Here's what makes Hobart's crisis so brutal. It feeds on itself. The state didn't build enough housing during the good years. Then COVID hit and people flooded in from the mainland, overwhelming the tiny amount of available rental stock. Then landlords started selling because their costs went through the roof. Land taxes, strata fees, everything spiking at once. One landlord watched their costs jump from 33% of their rental income to 46% in just 5 years. So properties disappeared from the rental market. And the ones that stayed? Landlords could charge whatever they wanted. Tenants had zero power, zero leverage, zero options. Hobart isn't just expensive now. It's being slowly hollowed out. The nurses, the teachers, the retail workers, the people who actually make a city function, they're being pushed to the edges or leaving completely. Young people are taking their skills and their futures somewhere else. The city is changing, and not for the better. And it's getting worse, Vacancy rates have been falling for 3 months straight. New apartments barely being built. The state government is under massive pressure to do something, but solutions take years, and these people need somewhere to live next month. For tenants in Hobart, the question isn't, can I afford this rent? It's, is there anything left at all? But Hobart isn't alone in this nightmare. Up north, another crisis is unfolding, one driven by devastating speed. Darwin, the boom that's crushing everyone. Darwin is experiencing something I can only describe as shocking. Home values exploded by 17% in 2025. Rents jumped 8.2% in a single year to a median of $650 a week. And the vacancy rate, it collapsed from 1.4% to just 0.7% in 12 months. Read that again. The vacancy rate was cut in half in 1 year. Darwin now has the highest rental returns of any Australian capital, around 6.3% on average. For units, it's 7.5%. Investors are flooding in like it's a gold rush. Property sales surged nearly 60% year on year. Homes that used to sit on the market for almost 2 months now sell in 5 weeks. What's driving this? Defence spending is pouring into the north. Massive gas infrastructure projects are underway. The job market is white hot with unemployment at just 3.4%. That's 25% below the long-term average. Darwin has become a city where good jobs are everywhere and housing is nowhere. But here's what makes Darwin's boom absolutely brutal for renters: the speed of the change. Just 18 months ago, Darwin's rental market was soft. Vacancy rates were comfortably above 1%. Rents were stable, even dropping in some areas. Then, everything flipped overnight. Defence announced expanded operations in the north. Gas projects started construction. Workers flooded in, needing somewhere to live, and suddenly, Darwin ran out of rentals. Tenants are experiencing whiplash. People who renewed their lease in 2023 at $450 a week are now staring at renewal notices for $550, $600, even $650. That's not gradual inflation you can plan for. That's a financial bomb going off that forces you to make instant, gut-wrenching decisions about whether you can even afford to stay in your own home. Families are being torn apart by these choices. Do you pay the increase and cut your grocery budget in half? Pull your kids out of sports and activities? Give up any dream of ever saving money? Or do you pack up everything and leave, abandoning your job, your kids' schools, your friends, everything you've built? And unlike the southern capitals where there are at least some protections for renters, caps on rent increases, regulations, the Northern Territory has almost nothing. Landlords can raise rents as high as the market will tolerate. Right now, the market will tolerate almost anything. The competition is insane. Inspection queues stretching down entire streets, applications being submitted within hours of a listing going online, tenants offering to pay 3 months, 6 months upfront just to have a chance. Darwin's rental market has always been a roller coaster, spiking during mining booms, crashing when projects end. But this surge feels different because it's hitting regular working families, not just temporary workers. People with kids in school, with government jobs, with real roots in the community, they're being priced out. And here's the terrifying part. Nobody knows how long this will last. If defence spending stays high, if gas projects run longer than planned, Darwin's boom could keep going for years. But if those projects wrap up early, if the economy shifts, the market could crash just as fast as it rose. Tenants live with that uncertainty every single day. Pay the higher rent and pray your income keeps up. Or leave, and go where exactly? Because the crisis isn't just in Tasmania and the Northern Territory. It's spread to Australia's west coast, where a different kind of disaster is taking shape. Perth, where landlords have all the power. Perth's vacancy rate is stuck at 0.7%. Rents climbed almost 6% in a year, hitting a median of $758 a week. $758 a week. That's more expensive than Brisbane, more expensive than Adelaide, second only to Sydney and Melbourne among the major capitals. Western Australia's economy is on fire. Mining jobs are plentiful. Commodity prices are holding strong. and people keep flooding in from the unaffordable East Coast, desperately seeking somewhere cheaper to live. Perth added thousands of new residents in 2025, and almost all of them need rentals. But Perth didn't build enough housing. Those apartment buildings that were supposed to save the market. Construction delays killed them. Cost blowouts made projects unprofitable. Developments that got approved years ago are still just empty lots, stuck in financing hell or abandoned completely. The result? A rental market locked in crisis mode. Just 1,304 available properties across the entire metro area in late 2025. For a city of over 2 million people, tenants describe it as relentless. You see a property listed online, you book an inspection within minutes, because if you wait an hour, it'll be gone. You show up and there are 40 other people in the queue. The property leases that same afternoon to someone who offered more than the asking rent. Rent bidding, where agents basically encourage tenants to offer above the advertised price, is everywhere, even though it's technically discouraged. Tenants know that if they don't offer extra, someone else will. So rents advertised at $550 lease for $600. Properties listed at $700 go for $750. It's an auction in everything but name. Perth's crisis has a special kind of cruelty because people remember what it used to be like. The mining crash from 2014 to 2018 left Perth's property market dead. Rents were cheap, vacancies everywhere. People who lived through that remember when tenants had the power, when you could actually negotiate, when looking at a rental didn't require military-level planning. That world is completely gone. Perth in 2026 is a landlord's paradise. Rents go up every year by the absolute maximum tenants can handle. Maintenance requests get ignored because if you complain, there are 10 people ready to take your place. Lease renewals come with immediate demands for rent increases. Pay up or get out. And getting out isn't really an option. The entire city is locked tight. For families trying to survive, the numbers are crushing. A household earning $80,000, a solid middle-class income, is now paying $39,400 a year just for rent. That's nearly half their pre-tax income. Before food, before power bills, before anything else. The stress destroys everything. Parents skip meals so their kids can eat. Couples fight about money in ways they never did before. People take second jobs, third jobs, just to cover the rent increase. What makes Perth's situation even more confusing is that different data sources can't even agree on how bad it is. Official figures show vacancy at 0.7%, but the Real Estate Institute says it's 2.0%. That's not a small difference. That's a fundamental disagreement about reality. The truth is probably somewhere in the middle, but for desperate tenants, it doesn't matter. Whether vacancy is sub 1% or just above it, the outcome is identical. Finding an affordable place feels impossible. Perth's crisis will ease eventually. Buildings will get finished. Migration might slow down. Mining jobs could soften if prices drop. But eventually isn't now. And for tenants living through this nightmare today, eventually means absolutely nothing. Yet even Perth's crisis looks manageable compared to what's happening in regional Queensland, a disaster that almost no one is talking about. Regional Queensland, the crisis nobody's watching. While Sydney and Melbourne suck up all the housing crisis headlines, regional Queensland is experiencing rent increases that make the capitals look tame. Townsville saw rents explode by 22.2% in 1 year. Mackay jumped 22%. Cairns climbed over 12%. Let me be crystal clear. These aren't normal annual increases. These are economic shocks. The typical rent in Townsville hit $552 a week. In Mackay, $666. In Cairns, $628. Sure, those sound lower than Sydney or Melbourne, but compare them to what people actually earn in these towns. Compare them to what those same properties cost to rent just 3 years ago. The increases are absolutely devastating. Regional Queensland's vacancy rates tell you everything you need to know. Cairns is at 0.76%, Mackay at 0.67%, Townsville below 1%. These are capital city level tight markets happening in regional centres that were supposed to be the affordable escape. What happened? A perfect storm of disasters. COVID brought thousands of people fleeing the big cities, chasing lifestyle, space, and lower costs. They poured into Cairns, Townsville, Mackay, Rockhampton. They competed for rental properties that were never designed to handle that kind of invasion. Mining and infrastructure investment exploded. The resources sector is booming. Major defence projects around Townsville, gas developments near Gladstone. All these projects bring workers who need rentals and can often afford to pay more than locals. And construction delays sealed everyone's fate. Regional Queensland was supposed to build its way out of the shortage. Apartments, townhouses, new subdivisions, they were all planned. But construction costs went through the roof. Labour shortages killed progress. Projects that looked profitable in 2022 became financial disasters by 2024. Surging demand crashed into stalled supply. Tenants are experiencing something uniquely cruel, being priced out of the places they thought would always stay affordable. Families who moved to Cairns for the lifestyle, for the lower costs, for a better quality of life. They're now watching rent consume 40%, 50%, sometimes more of their income. Think about the math. A single parent in Townsville earning $60,000 a year, that's a decent regional wage, is paying $552 a week in rent. That's $28,700 a year. Nearly half their pre-tax income gone before they buy a single item of food. The rental stress is showing up in heartbreaking ways. Food banks are seeing more and more working families. Community organisations report families seeking emergency accommodation even though both parents have jobs. Schools are watching kids change addresses mid-semester as families get priced out and have to move farther and farther away, disrupting their education, their friendships, their entire stability. What makes regional Queensland's crisis so insidious is how invisible it remains on the national stage. When Sydney's rents spike, it's front-page news. When regional towns experience the same thing, or worse, it barely registers outside the local paper. But the human impact is just as real. Maybe even more real because these communities don't have the same social services, the same support networks, the same backup options as the big cities. Tenants in Cairns or Townsville or Mackay can't just move to a cheaper suburb. The whole region is locked tight. They can't relocate to another city for work because those cities are expensive too. They're trapped in a broken market, and the rest of the country isn't even paying attention. Which brings us to the fifth city, the quiet catastrophe that almost nobody is talking about, Adelaide, the slow motion disaster. Adelaide was supposed to be the safe haven, the affordable capital, the place where renters and buyers could still find reasonable prices while Sydney and Melbourne spiraled into insanity. Then something broke. Rents surged through 2024 and into 2025. The median hit $625 a week by late last year. Annual growth has slowed to 2.7%, down from previous years, but that number is hiding the real crisis. Adelaide's vacancy rate sits at 0.8%. That's 7 straight months of staying near record lows. There are 1,215 available rental properties across the entire metro area for a city of 1.4 million people. But here's what makes Adelaide's crisis different from everywhere else. It's not about rent growth anymore. It's about how impossible rents are compared to what people actually earn. South Australia is now the second least affordable state for renters in the entire country. The gap between local wages and rental costs is widening faster than almost anywhere else. A median Adelaide rent of $625 might sound reasonable compared to Sydney's $817. But Adelaide's median household income is way lower too. Tenants on minimum wage are being absolutely crushed. A full-time worker earning $47,000 a year is paying $32,500 annually just for rent. That's nearly 70% of their pre-tax income. Even people on decent middle-class salaries, $70,000, $80,000 a year, are spending 40 to 45% of their income just on housing. Let that sink in. People earning above the median wage are devoting nearly half their income to rent alone. That's not sustainable. That's not a functioning economy. That's financial stress that poisons every single other aspect of life. Adelaide's rental crisis looks different than Darwin's explosive boom or Hobart's total squeeze. There's no dramatic spike making headlines. Rent growth has actually slowed down. Vacancy isn't quite as suffocating as Perth or Hobart, but walk through Adelaide's northern suburbs, talk to families in the outer southern areas, and you hear the same story over and over. We're being priced out of our own city. What makes Adelaide's situation so deeply troubling is the complete lack of relief coming. The city isn't experiencing a construction boom like Brisbane or Melbourne. New apartment developments aren't launching anywhere near fast enough to help. Investors, spooked by what happened to landlords in Victoria and Canberra with rising costs, regulatory nightmares, and falling profits, are staying away. Adelaide is stuck in a terrible equilibrium. Rents are high enough to cause genuine suffering for tenants, but they're not high enough, and investor confidence isn't strong enough for the market to fix itself through new construction. Tenants describe feeling forgotten. When politicians talk about the rental crisis, they mention Sydney, Melbourne, maybe Brisbane. Adelaide barely gets a mention. Yet people are struggling just as hard, losing just as much of their income to rent, facing just as much stress trying to find stable housing. Adelaide's rental crisis isn't loud. It isn't dramatic. It's not making headlines. It's a slow, grinding pressure that wears people down month after month, year after year, until there's nothing left. The pattern connecting all 5 cities. Step back for a moment, look at these 5 cities: Hobart, Darwin, Perth, regional Queensland, Adelaide, and ask yourself, what connects them? They're not random examples. They represent something specific happening in Australia's housing system right now. They're the places where the rental shortage never got better, where construction couldn't keep up with demand, where government help either failed or never showed up at all, where economic forces, migration, job growth, investment money, pushed demand higher while supply stayed frozen. Nationally, Australia's vacancy rate sits at 1.4% as we start 2026. That's historically low, but it's hiding enormous differences between cities. In Melbourne, vacancy is 1.8%. In Canberra, 1.4%. Those markets are still tight, sure, but they have options. Some breathing room, some chance of finding something within a reasonable time. In Hobart, Perth, Darwin, Adelaide, Cairns, Townsville, there is no breathing room whatsoever. Vacancy below. 1% isn't just a statistic, it's a crisis that plays out every single weekend at rental inspections. Every time a lease comes up for renewal. Every time a family realizes they can't afford to stay in their own city, the place where they work, where their kids go to school, where they've built their entire lives. The Australian rental market isn't one market anymore. It's splitting into winners and losers, tight markets and easier ones, cities with options and cities where options don't exist. And the difference between living in the right city versus the wrong one? It's absolutely massive. It determines whether you can save anything for the future or live paycheck to paycheck forever. Whether you can afford to live near your job or face hours of soul-crushing commuting. Whether you have any power at all in negotiations with your landlord, or you just accept whatever terms they demand because you have no other choice. For tenants in these 5 markets, the rental crisis isn't some abstract policy debate. It's not a headline they scroll past on their phone. It's the central organizing fact of their financial lives. The thing that determines everything else, where they can live, how much they can save, what opportunities their children will have access to. What comes next probably isn't relief. Not in 2026, maybe not even in 2027. Construction timelines are measured in years, not months. Migration patterns don't reverse overnight. Economic conditions, the mining boom in WA, the defence spending in Darwin, the interstate flood into Queensland, those aren't temporary blips. They're structural changes that could persist for years. Watch what happens when landlords in these markets fully realise how much power they have. Watch how rents move when there's no competition, no tenant choice, no market pressure to keep increases reasonable. Watch the vacancy rates, not the meaningless national average, but the city-specific numbers. If Hobart's 0.4% ticks up to 0.6%, that might signal real change coming. If Darwin's 0.7% holds steady through 2026, the boom might run far longer than anyone expects. Watch rental returns. Perth's houses are delivering over 4% gross yields. Darwin's are hitting 6.3%. When returns are that strong, investors keep pouring in. New landlords enter the market. That eventually creates supply, but eventually might mean 3, 4, 5 years from now. Watch, most importantly, the people. The actual tenants living through this nightmare every single day. Because this isn't just about economics or statistics or impersonal market forces. It's about the public servant in Hobart who's applied for 14 rentals and been rejected 14 times, who's starting to wonder if she'll end up homeless despite having a good government job. It's about families in Townsville watching their rent explode by 22% in 1 year and trying to figure out what to cut. Food, electricity, their kids' sports. Where do you even begin making those choices? It's about young couples in Perth offering 6 months rent up front just to secure a lease, wiping out their savings, killing any dream of ever owning a home themselves. These are the real faces of Australia's rental crisis in 2026, not the national average that politicians love to quote, not the metropolitan median that makes everything look manageable, the people trapped in the wrong cities, at the worst possible time, with nowhere left to turn. Like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next video.